Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. How about a video just for the folks getting a start in leathercraft? You're going to be surprised at what you can do. And I think this project is going to fall into that category. We're going to start from scratch. We're going to make our pattern. We're going to set spots, snaps, and one of my all-time favorites, a Spanish basket weave. Now, here's a hint. This one comes out nicely. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com or check below. We've got links there. Going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table, get started. With most every video, we're going to look at what we're doing, then we jump over to a digital pick for our pattern. We're not going to do that this time. We're going to make our pattern from scratch, but it's super easy to do, and we're going to pick up a few tricks. So our cuff, we're going to make this 3/4 of an inch wide. I'm just going to go with some poster board. So let's take our square. Now let's make sure we're starting from a good square edge. And I'm going to come in and make a mark at 3/4 of an inch. But we've got to be careful here. With a pen, this will actually push the tip of the pen out a little bit. That makes our cuff a little bit thinner. So what I'm saying there is let's put that pen a little bit up under that edge. That's a little more of an accurate measurement. So let's come down here and let's do the same thing. All right, we've got our two marks. Now I'd like to flip this around because now we can see this is parallel. If I've mismarked a measurement here, which happens a lot, say I do an inch down here, well now I can actually see that something is wrong. So let's make sure we're parallel to our edge and our marks. Good, okay, so there's the width of our cuff. Now the next measurement, this can be confusing, but once you pick it up, you won't make this mistake. We're going to measure snap to snap. Here's what I'm talking about, okay? So we need a measurement on our wrist. I'm going to take a simple tape measure and let's just wrap that around our wrist and get a good measurement. Now I don't want that tight. Let's back out a little bit, make that comfortable on our wrist. If we don't have a good tape measure, easy enough. Let's just take a piece of lace, wrap that around our wrist, and now we can just drop that on a straight edge and get a good measurement, okay? So for me, 7 inches comfortable, so 7.5. Let's write that down. That's our snap to snap. So let's start right here. Make a line. Now from this line, let's go 7.5 inches, or whatever the circumference of our wrist is. Good, we've got that. So those are our snaps. Now let's come out for the actual length of our cuff. On this end, we're going to add snaps. This is going to be the cap of the snap. So what I'd like is a little extra leather there so we have a tab. So right there, let's come out 3/4 of an inch. On this end, we're going to have the other side of the snap. It's going to be up underneath the first as we bring that around. So let's just go 1/2 of an inch out there. Good. There's the true length of our cuff. If we measure 7.5, our cuff is always going to be too small. Next thing we need, let's start with a good center line. I almost always work out from a center line. Makes everything very easy, very symmetrical. So on this, 1/2 of 3/4 is 3/8 of an inch. So let's make a mark there. Same down here. We've got that. Let's connect those two. And again, let's flip this around. And we look good and parallel. Okay. There's our center line. So thus far, nothing difficult. Now on this, let's go ahead and circle that. There's a snap. There's a snap. Okay. We're going to add 2 spots to this. Now here's a great trick. So we can take this distance. We're going to add two spots. If we divide this distance by 2, actually, that's only going to give us 1 spot in the middle. So let's always divide by 1 more than we want. So I'm going to add 2 spots. Let's divide this distance by 3. Well, luckily, I'm 7.5 inches. So therefore, 2.5 and 5. Good. Since we divide by 1 more than we need, we make sure that we have an even distance here, here, and to our stop. So basically, by dividing by 1 more, we're actually adding in our stop, okay? So now, we're going to give our braid a 1/4 inch spread left to right, top to bottom. That'll make sense here in just a second. But what we need is 1/8 of an inch line on either side of our center line. So let's come in 1/8 of an inch. Good. Now again, let's kind of work that pin a little bit at an angle. Same thing on the other side. Okay, easy enough on that. So now, again, let's work from a center mark. From our snap to our first spot, 2.5 inches, let's make a mark at 1 1/4. Now, let's mark across our 2 lines. Now what I'd like to do, let's come out 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to add 4 lines on either side of our center line. Flip this around, do the same thing on this side. And 1 more. Okay, so again, since we started on a center line, everything's going to be even. In fact, let's just double check. Just a hair under 1/2 inch and a hair under 1/2 inch. Perfect. I'm going to do the same thing here and here. One more. Again, because we started on a center line, everything is symmetrical. That looks like a complicated pattern. Actually, it's not. Super easy thus far. Let's do this. We're going to punch a hole for our snaps, punch a hole for our braid, but for our spots, we don't want to punch a hole. We simply want to mark that. So I like to just take a red marker and let's circle those. That keeps me from making a mistake. Well, all told, there's our pattern. Easy enough. Let's step over to our main table. Let's cut this out, punch our holes, get ready to cut some leather. Let's start with a term I use in every video, new blade or sharp blade every time with our pattern and our leather. Now, I like the box cutter. The blades are inexpensive, very sharp, easy to replace. But one thing I like, retractable blade. I don't have an open blade on my table. So let's start by cutting this out. And we've got that. Okay, next step, we're going to punch our holes. Let's go with what I consider one of the best revolving or rotary punches on the market. It's a good solid tool, replaceable tubes. Now, when we're punching our holes on our pattern, what I'd like to do, let's go with the smallest tube on our punch. That gives us our most accurate mark. So let's start with these. I'm just going to do my best to hit our cross marks on this set. Let's start right there. And last. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Do my best to get these parallel to each other. And our last one, well, that doesn't look bad. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing to both sides. Our last 2 holes, okay? So when we look at these little pieces that punch out, if we've got a perfect square in that, we've made an accurate punch. Last 2 marks, let's come down and punch for our snap. And there we are, our pattern's ready. Nothing difficult thus far. I'm going to clean this up, reset. Let's cut some leather. One of the toughest parts of any project for me, picking our color combinations, because at Weaver, we've got some absolutely beautiful leathers. Same with our lace. Now, we've got some good videos on the different types of tannage, weights, and whatnot. We're not going to go into great detail there. What we need is just a lighter weight leather. This is a 3 to 4 ounce, so it's just a hair under 1/16 of an inch, but we want a little body to this. So we're going to use our Solstice. Love this. It's a veg tan leather, 3 to 4 ounce, but again, it's got a little body. This comes in a double shoulder. It's a little bit smaller cut, good for us crafters, and we have got some gorgeous colors in this. This is the cognac. In fact, this is left over from my last double shoulder. I use a lot of this. So let's take our pattern. Let's see if we can drop this in. There we go, right there. Now, this has got a top coat on it. It's going to be a little bit slick. So let's make sure we hold this down. And with our awl, let's just scribe a line in our leather. Good. Let's try not to let that pattern move. And now let's do the same on the other side. Good. Well, we can see that. Easy enough to scribe. So now with our square, let's cut this out. And again, we've got a pretty sharp blade on this. We've only cut our pattern with it. So let's lay that in and see if we can get as clean a cut as possible. Now, when we move, let's take our finger. Once our blade passes, let's drop our finger right there. Yeah, there we go. That'll keep that from fading out and give us a bad cut. All right, let's cut the rest of this. Good, and cut to size. Now, this is a groover. This technically is for an edge where we're going to hand sew. That's actually going to cut a groove in the edge of the leather. That gives us a guide and a little bit of a trench there that our stitch is going to sink into. I use this on every edge because it gives us a nice edge look. I typically set this at 1/8 of an inch and leave it there. So let's just run down both sides here. Maybe another to get that nice and consistent. Yeah, that gives us a pretty edge. There we go. Okay, let's step over to our punch table. Let's start with something that I wasn't aware of when I got into leathercraft, but it's been a big help to me. There's two types of punches. So we've got a revolving or a rotary punch, but we've also got a drive punch. They both have advantages and disadvantages. So I love the revolving punch. The anvil, built right in. It's a one-hand operation. The only downside, say we've got to sink a hole in the middle of this panel. With that throat, we'll never get that deep. So we need to jump over to a drive punch. Now these come in multiple sizes, just like our tubes there. But now we're going to need a mallet. We need a good punch board, but under that, we need our marble. At Weaver, we've got some beautiful pieces of marble. And right here, I've just got a scrap piece of leather in there because the poly board on top of the marble gets very slick. It's going to move around, but if we put a little scrap in there, that doesn't move at all. Okay, so let's do this. Let's move everything aside. With our pattern, we've got an awl. Let's lay this in, and again, as carefully as we can, let's mark. Don't let our pattern move, but let's mark for our holes. Good, we've got the last of our lace holes marked, so let's come back. We're going to mark for our snap, spot, spot, and lastly, our snap, okay? Well, I can certainly see that, and it looks good. Now, on our hole, I want a hole that's a little bit smaller than 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to go down all the way to the smallest hole on my revolving punch. Let's just do our best to hit these holes on the mark. Well, there we go. That looks pretty good thus far. Let's work our way all the way down, and I'll do the other two sections. And there we are. Now, that's a lot of holes in a small space, but two big points. First off, speed, not what we're after. Let's enjoy this. But secondly, if we're not perfect, and we absolutely are not on this one, once we braid this, we're not going to see that. Okay, next step, let's come up to about the second tube. Now, on our shorter end, this is going to be the back side of our snap. I'm going to drop in a hole. That's more like a rivet. The post on that snap's more like a rivet. But on this end, for our cap, let's go all the way up to our largest tube. And there we are, okay? Last step here, we don't have to go this route by any means. We could leave that where it is. We could clip the corners. We could cut that across at an angle. But we've got a tool, let's use it. This is called a round end punch. Again, we've got this in multiple sizes for multiple widths of strap. So let's drop this on our end. Yeah, how clean and easy is that? Okay, we are ready to add a braid. Let's step over to our pattern table. We're going to be working in a pretty small space here, so we're going to pick up our braid on a larger piece, then we'll jump over to our cuff. But that's part of the point of our cuff. We're going to keep it thin, finished. Anyone would love to wear this. So we're going to use two things. First off, a Permalock needle. This is about the best invention in leathercraft ever. It's just a tube, but it's got a hole in the end that's threaded. So we'll cut a taper on our lace and just screw that on. Makes the whole thing very easy. On our deer lace, one of my all-time favorites. We've got so many beautiful colors here. Anything's going to look good on the brown, but let's pick our favorite color. Or how about we make this a gift? Find out whoever the recipient of this is, find out their favorite color. Let's add that in. That would be a nice gift. Okay, so let's start right here. I'm going to take a piece of lace. Now, this is our suede lace, good bit larger. I'm going to cut a taper in one end, okay? Let's take our Permalock, and all I'm going to do is screw that down on that piece of lace. Yeah, there we go. Easy enough. I'm going to do the same thing to the other end. And there we are. Now, typically, I want to go about 10 times my length, but I've got just a good bit of extra lace here. So let's bring one needle from either side, either end of our lace, through that hole. Now, keeping our lace flat, that's an absolute priority, but we can do that. There's a couple of tricks. So let's set one needle aside. Okay, we've got this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run my finger down my lace. So now I know if I put my needle through there, that lace is flat. Now it can turn on us, absolutely, but once we get it through, it's going to flatten out. Okay, easy enough. So let's flip this over. I'm going to come right back to that same hole. Let's run our fingers down our lace. Bring that around, come right through the same hole. Good, we've got an X on the back, and on the front, same thing. Now let's take this piece, and let's go to the third hole, opposite side. All right, and now let's come back to the second hole up on the back. This is going to make sense here in just a minute. We'll see a pattern with this. So let's pull that through, move that back out of our way. Now, let's go to the next open hole. Let's flip around and come back to the last open hole. Okay, there's our pattern. Let's take this all the way to the end. Good. Now, when we get down to the end, there we go, next open hole. Let's come back around, same thing on the back. And now, let's go through this last hole a second time. That's going to make this a very square end on it. There we go. If we didn't do that, we would just have, at the end, the two pieces of lace sticking out, but that's going to bring that across nicely, okay? So over to this piece, we're going to do exactly the same thing, but let's start here. Notice this first piece. I'm going to go under that and then over the second. Let's pull that through. Good. And then to the second hole down, opposite side. Okay. Back to that first hole. Right here, we're making an X on the back. Let's bring that through. And over to our front. Now we start our braid. So notice right here, I went under that piece. Now I'm going to go over that, under that second, and over the third. And I'm going to go to the third hole, opposite side. Okay, let's turn this over. And again, we're back into our pattern, so I'm going to come across and up one. And now we're going to the third hole, opposite side. So we went under this piece, now we'll go over, under, and over. And then into that third hole, opposite side. There we go. Okay, so that's our braid. Basically, we're doing the same thing on both sides. I'm going to finish this out. Now, when we get down to our end, let's keep that pattern going. I'm going to go over our first piece because last time I went under. So let's go over that, pull that through, and now down to our last hole. Good, now that braid's very wide open. Looks good, but what we're going to do, we've got a smaller area here. So that braid is going to be very tight. We'll not see any of the leather behind that, okay? Let's go over to our deer lace. let's use our chocolate brown. That's going to be a nice contrast here. So what I'm going to do is pull out, let's go about 11 times our length, and we're going to use the smallest of the Permalock needles. And there we go. Actually, that's a pretty strong bite there. Over to this, let's do the same thing. So I'm going to come in from both sides. Now again, on this lace, we want to make sure we keep our top grain out. So let's run our finger down that, run that through. A little bit tighter on this. Now let's make sure we even out our distance there. Good. All right, so let's move one aside. So just like we did on our practice piece, I'm going to come to the second hole, opposite side. Back to that same starting hole. And then down to the third hole, opposite side. And now we're just making our X. And down to our last hole. Okay, good. Let's turn to this side. Run my fingers down my lace. So again, we're going to go under that first piece, but notice our Permalock needle, it's flattened on the end. That's a big help. So under the first piece, let's draw that through. Good. Now to the second hole, other side. And pull that down. We're going to flip this over, back to that same hole. There's our X, and now we start our braid. So I'm going to cross over this first band, go under the second one, over the third, and then through the third hole, opposite side. And through that last hole, we've got a pretty braid there. Now, if it's not perfect, we could always come back with our Permalock and just scoot those strands around a little bit. Try to get that a little more consistent. But secondly, too, we're going to flatten that out. That's going to help that out a little bit. All right, so on our back, let's just take our 2 needles, and I'm just going to run up 2, maybe 3 X's. Let's pull that through. Now, this will soften up over time. These are going to be a little bit stiff to start with, but with just a little bit of wear, these are going to soften up nicely. Okay, so we've got those 2 pieces pulled through. Now, let's lay our knife. I don't use this part of my blade very often. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this down, and I'm going to pull my lace across the blade. That way we don't cut into anything. Okay, well, that looks pretty good thus far. I'm going to do the same thing to our other 2 sets. And there we are. Do we have 3 perfect braids? No, we absolutely do not. Handmade, but those look pretty good. Now, we've got one more step. That's going to help. But after that, we're going to set spot snaps, and we're done here. So let's reset here, set our spots. I add spots to most every project. They look great, they're inexpensive, and they're very easy to add. Well, now our first thought, we're going to work these into a design. But how about this? In our closet, do we have a pair of boots, hat, purse, bag, belt, things that we don't wear anymore? Let's pull those out, dress them up with some spots. We got a brand new product. All right, so multiple ways to set these, but if we're just getting started, it's as easy as this. So I've got an art knife, and I've got a little palette here. Now on our art knife, this has got the longer blade on it because we're going to push through the leather, and that way we're going to make room for our tines. So let's take one of these. Love these too. This is the antique nickel. It's got a flower design on the top. So right there, I've got our mark. So I'm going to take that spot. There we go. And I'm just going to press it into the leather. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but now I can see where my tines need to be. All right, let's take our art knife, and I'm just going to push this through easily. I don't want more slit than spot. So really what we're trying to do is simply mimic the shape of that tine. All right, let's flip our knife around, come in from that other side. Good, we've opened that up. Let's press this through. and it sinks right down flush. Just what we're looking for. I'm going to do the same thing to this side. Okay, so easy enough thus far. We simply mark, punch through at our spot. Now let's flip this over. I'm going to take my art knife. Let's be careful because we got a blade there. But let's take those tines and let's bend those inward. Okay, we've got that. Now last step, let's put this on our marble. Now I'm going to tap these down. We're going to sink those tines and they're actually going to curve around a little bit. Now I don't want to hit this hard enough to ding it, but let's set those tines. That's all we need. Good. Now when I run my finger across that, I can feel that, but just barely. That's not going to snag or grab on anything, particularly hair on our arm. Well, that looks good thus far. Let's step over to our punch table, add our snaps. We're done. Before we go to our snap, there's one thing I'd like to do. Let's set our braid. A couple of ways we can do this. We could always go with our square. In fact, let's flip that over and we could press that down. Again, we're just setting the braid. It's going to make it a little bit thinner, but also it's going to make it a little more consistent. Now, I like using a tack hammer. Ball peen will work just as well. But all we're going to do is we're going to tap this down. I'm going to work across it. Yeah, there we go. Makes it look a little more consistent. I'm going to do the other two the same way. Down the side and then back up the middle. Okay. Well, that actually looks pretty good. Now, on our snap, we're going to go with a segment snap. To me, it's the easiest snap to set. So right here, we've got a cap and we've got a socket. So our socket, we're going to bring through from the flesh side or the skive side. Okay. Let's go to our anvil. Right there, that second indent fits that cap perfectly. Let's set that down in there. Now, we've got two setters here. We've got one with a post and one with an indent. Let's start with our post. I'm going to drop that right in there and just two good shots. That's all we need. Let's lift that out. There we are. We've got half of our snap set. Okay. Over to this side, we're going to take our post and our stud. So our post is going to come through from the flesh side. Good. And then let's drop that right on top. And with the other setter, let's put that right there. And I'm going to set that flat on my quartz or my marble. And that's all we need right there. Well, that is a good looking wristband. How's our snap work? Perfectly. How very nice. That's a good looking cuff. I've never really been one to wear much in the way of adornment, but I'll wear that in a heartbeat. That looks good. And it's comfortable on my wrist. It's going to soften up, but we've got a good fit. Now, another great point. Like I said, a gift for someone. We find out what their favorite color is. Oh, we're going to nail it on that gift. But I hope you have a great time designing your cuff, making your cuff, and I hope you wear it and love it for years to come. Good luck with your projects.